Are we live? We are live. Good evening. Welcome to the City of Indio closed session. I'm Mayor Wayman Furman. Time is approximately 4 p.m. Could I have a roll call, please?
Mayor, for the record, all council members are present today.
Okay, item number 2 is public comment. This time is set aside for public comment for items not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments?
No comments.
No public comments. So item number 3, adjourn to closed session. Roxanne?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the City Council shall adjourn to closed session to consider the items listed on the closed session agenda.
Okay, we'll adjourn to closed session. Call to order. Welcome to the City of Indio Joint City Council, Indio Water Authority Successor Agency meeting. My name is Mayor Wayman Furman. I'll be chairing this meeting. Could I get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Holmes,
Present.
Councilmember Miller,
Present.
Councilmember Ramos Amit. And-
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Ortiz
Present.
and Mayor Furman.
Present. The next item is invocation. Do we have anyone to do the invocation for us?
Yes, we have Pastor Michael Harlan from Destiny Church on Zoom.
Okay, we have Mr. Harlan. If I could somebody please stand and after remain standing for our pledge of allegiance.
Lord, we just thank you today for this meeting as we come together and Lord, we pray over our city, all of our city officials, Lord, that you continue to lead and guide them, giving them wisdom and direction as we continue, Lord, to serve the people and to honor you in all that they do. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. If I could ask us to remain standing and ask Chief Washburn to lead us in the pledge.
Certainly. Place your hand over your heart and ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Thank you. All right, next order of business is item number 4, City Attorney Report on closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The city council met in closed session for the items listed therein, and there is no reportable action.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz. And we'll continue with number 5, item 5.1, which is a presentation by Mr. Josh Bonner, General Manager of the Coachella Valley Public Cemetery District. Mr. Bonner, the floor is yours.
Time around. Oh, there we go. I even forgot how to use the speaker. But it's nice to see everyone. I understand it's been quite a while, if ever, since the district has come and presented. So I'm glad to be able to come and update everyone on what our special district is doing, which of course does serve the residents of Indio. Just a little bit of background. I think we have there it is, presentation. A little bit of background about the cemetery district. It is an independent special district. It's formed in 1927, so it's been around quite a long time. It's actually one of the larger cemetery districts in California, and it's actually other cemetery districts in Riverside County combined. So our district is quite large. Our boundaries include roughly from Rancho Mirage on out to Desert Center. Unfortunately, the cemetery has been very busy. One more stark reminder of the pandemic we're in. Normally, we do about 350 interment services a year. We did almost 600 last year. So quite a spike in the amount of activity at the district, and we're handling that, of course, as best as we can. In order to handle some of that rapid change and deal with the caseload, we've done a lot of modernization of our operations, which is some of the things that I wanted to go through with the folks today. Our leadership team is comprised of 5 trustees, which are appointed by the Riverside County Board of Supervisors. And their leadership has been very important as we've gone through the pandemic and also made some of the necessary operational changes and structural changes that we've made to get to where we're at. I have 3 of them with me today, Vice Chair Vossler, Trustee Cornell, and Trustee Dr. Bruce Underwood. Our chairman, Ernesto Rosales, and our other trustee, John Rios, are also not present with us today, but part of the Board of Trustees. As far as budget goes, we gave the 2021-22 budget book to the council members to review. Most of the numbers are in there. Just real quickly, though, our financials are very strong. We have about $14 million when you combine our investments, our overall portfolio. So we're able to sustain operations at a very healthy clip, very healthy reserves, and our endowment fund is good as well. Right now, we're running an operating budget for this year of $3.1 million. A lot of that is investment into infrastructure, equipment to make our operations more efficient and better serve the public. We've also been very fortunate this year. We've received a little over $110,000 in funding through grants and other funding available through the state. So we're taking advantage of outside money wherever we can to accomplish the work that we're doing. Just some of the changes that we're doing, some of the capital investments. We're investing a lot in infrastructure, and we're focusing on the services we provide, but also focusing on trying to become more efficient, especially as it relates to our long-term expenses. Some of the things that we've invested in is new portable chapels for our graveside services for our families. We've also invested in lowering kits, which is one of the images you see there. Allows us to lower the caskets automated instead of having to do it by hand, which is quite an improvement, both for the family services and also on the operational end. We've invested in a new boardroom, put a lot of money into the AV system. That way members of the public can join our Board of Trustee meetings and view them seamlessly. It also sets us up in case we have any other issues with the pandemic as well. So that's been a nice improvement for us too. We've also invested in our CRM system, our internal IT systems, and we have, it'll come up a little bit later, but we have a new website that's ready to launch at the end of the month as well. So it's been a very busy 8 months for us so far. Some other cemetery investments. We've put almost a little over $100,000 into an automated irrigation system. Kind of sounds like a small thing, but it's actually nice for us. We've been doing irrigation by hand for the last 90-something years, which means that the irrigation gets done while the families are visiting the grounds. This will allow us to do it at night, so we don't have an interruption to those visitations anymore. We've invested over $100,000 in security as well. We have cameras in, we have security services on, would create just a little bit more of a safe environment for our families while they're there. We've invested into some things too that the public doesn't always readily see. One of the images you see there is of double-depth vaults, which allows us to bury 2 people into one site. And the way that it's set up, it's there in advance, so it's a lot less work for us when we come back to do the second service, which translates to lower fees and less financial output by the district and for our community. As far as some of the infrastructure improvements that are on the horizon, we are going to be repaving all of our roads. That's overdue. I think it's been about 12 or 13 years since we've done that. So we're going to go through and repave all of our roads. We have some landscaping additions that are coming as well. I mentioned the new website earlier. One of the nice things about the new website is it will allow for e-commerce, which is an important thing for us because during the pandemic, we had to shut down some of our operations for pre-need because we just simply didn't have the ability to stand in front of the folks and conduct business. So with the new e-commerce sites, we'll be able to do those remotely through Zoom meetings and actually conduct transactions without people having to physically come into us, which I think under the current conditions is going to be quite important for us. We continue to support our community through events and a lot of the traditional things that we do. Some of them have looked at a little bit different. We were able to do our Dia de los Muertos celebration this year. Estimated had crowds of over 5,000, so it was very well attended. Of course, we have 30 acres, so we can space them out accordingly. The Veterans Day and Memorial Day celebrations that we've traditionally done were pared down. They weren't open to the public this year, but they still did happen to honor the veterans and those on Memorial Day as well. So we've continued those operations as best we can. As far as future plans, right now our district has about 30 acres of developed property. We have roughly another 30 acres available. Right now at our current pace, we believe we'll be able to meet the needs of the public for at least the next close to 50 years. That phase 2 development, which you see outlined in red, will probably begin, I would say, in the next 2 to 3 years. We have one more section that's not open that we're in the process of opening. Once we start to push into that newer section, you'll start to see some additional development as well. At some point, we'll want to address our offices, main areas. The retention pond will have to be expanded to handle the water flow and some of the other things as well. But the district is in really good shape for quite a long time. And that's assuming we don't acquire more property or open up a cemetery in another area. If we just stood pat, we'll be able to serve the community for quite a while. So that's just a very quick update on some of the operations, infrastructure, and operational improvements that we're doing. I'm happy to answer any questions that the council members may have.
So do we have any questions or comments for Mr. Bonner?
Thank you, Josh. Learning, and this is something in our backyard, and I know I've been to several events and functions there. And it's so helpful. It's just thank you for providing us with this level of information and the enhancements as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Holmes. I appreciate it. Always happy to present and answer any questions that council may have or the city officials may have.
Thank you, Josh, for your coming and giving us the presentation. It's been a long time since we've heard some from the cemetery and, issues over the years with them. And I see your board members, you got some great individuals that are helping you. And congratulations on what you've been able to accomplish in 9 months with their help. It does take good leadership from the top and also yourself. So I think you should need to take a little credit for some of the work that's going on there. It's great to see. I go by there quite a bit on my way to La Quinta to visit some friends, and I drive by it and you can see the improvements from the road. So you've done an amazing job and look forward to the next few years, and let us know how the city of Indio can help you to be successful in your board. Thank you.
Yeah. Councilmember Miller, you've known me long enough to know I don't take credit for anything, but I appreciate the kudos. And yeah, our board of trustees expanded to 5 a few years ago, and they've worked really hard to try to get us where we're at. So I'm pleased with their efforts.
Great. Councilmember Amit.
No, thank you, Mr. Bonner, for the presentation. I don't recall when the last presentation from the district, but I'm very pleased to find out that you are working with our community to make sure that these services that are in need of the families in the community are affordable and can be planned for. So thank you for the update, and please reach out to us if we can help in any way.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Ortiz.
Yeah, again, thank you. And please say thank you to your staff as well. We know when people come to the cemetery, a lot of times it's a very hard time for their families. So it's great to see some better amenities for them. And, even just like the portable chapels with this heat out here, I'm sure people really appreciate that. And also for your workers, with the lowering kits. And, I'm sure they're happy to have those as well instead of the manual way of doing that. But yeah, great improvements. Great to see that, and great to see that our families will have a little bit of a better experience there during those hard times. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Ready. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Bonner. Mr. Bonner has been a friend and partner of the city for a long time, and it's good that we still have you in the community. And these are things that a lot of folks don't like to talk about. It's not a comfortable conversation, but it's something that's inevitable. And when we are able to have a facility like we have here in our valley, that's beautiful. And if you travel, you'll see some cemeteries are not up to par, as well as the Coachella Valley Cemetery. So we greatly appreciate it, and I also appreciate how the cemetery works with the community events. That means a lot to folks when they're out visiting their loved ones' grave sites and our veterans and the Day of the Dead ceremonies. Those mean a lot to our community. So I appreciate the presentation, appreciate all the work that's being done, and just thank you and your staff for what you do for us.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Thank
you, sir. Okay, we will move on to item number 6, report on City Council external and external boards. We'll go ahead and start with Councilmember Amit.
Aye.
You have a report for us, Councilmember?
No, I have no report this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Holmes?
I didn't have any commission meetings per se, but the holidays are always a great time to be amongst and around the community. And so there were a few things I attended. One of my favorites is a senior center holiday celebration. There's a whole lunch, there's music, and it really gathers our seniors. It provides them with a wonderful meal and camaraderie and closeness and festivities. And so I attended that. Wanted to thank the staff. What an amazing job. What a great show and a great example as well in terms of being able to painting all of the area around City Hall and partially around the library. I mean, that was just fantastic. Really appreciate the effort, the show of help, the show of confidence, and the support of the city. Attended the museum Old Fashioned Christmas, again, another one of those old time community gathering places. It's always a lot of fun, and it's most fun because you get to see the folks that have been around the community. Particularly, there's some new faces, but it's always good to see the old faces, the stalwarts, the people that have built the community. And something I enjoy, I think most people know I'm on the board of directors for JFK, and we gave away, oh gosh, I think the number is about 500 pies and cookies to all of the staff there as a way. Every year JFK does something, and this year it was pumpkin pie and cookies to all the staff as a way to show our appreciation and say thank you. And that really was the last couple of weeks. Hope everyone had a happy holiday.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Let me get my notes here. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for joining us for our meeting today. I first wanted to say Happy New Year and a big thank you to our staff and our residents for all their hard work and engagement in 2021. I'm looking forward to working with you on improving the quality of life for our residents and businesses this year, 2022. I didn't have any commission meetings, but I wanted to share some information about testing since there's been more demand for testing after the holidays. As you know, when you're exposed, it takes a few days for the virus to build up in your system until it can be detected. The PCR tests, like the ones that at the fairgrounds or through the county sites, can detect it more accurately and a bit earlier, maybe 3 to 4 days after exposure. The rapid tests are a bit less accurate because you need to have more of the virus in your system to set off the positive result. So it will detect around 4 to 5 days after exposure. If you have symptoms, you should test positive with either test. If you've just been exposed but don't have any symptoms, you want to test immediately and then test again a few days later to make sure you haven't become contagious during that time. For testing through the county site, please visit book.curative.com. They do require an appointment at this time because of the recent surge in testing. And please continue to isolate as much as possible as well. And just a heads up that California has extended today the indoor masking requirement until February 15th. I also want to remind everyone that we'll be having a redistricting workshop at our council chambers this Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. If you wish to join us, we will also live stream the event on Zoom, and we will have a live Spanish translator through Zoom as well. And that's all I have for today. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Ortiz, the redistricting workshop starts at 10 a.m., not 8 a.m.
Oh, sorry about that. 10 a.m. to 12.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate that. Happy holidays and Happy New Year to everyone. Looking forward to hopefully a maskless and better 2022. A couple of items. All my committees were dark, but we did have one of our newest Eagle Scouts, RJ, which is Ruben Diaz here. His father was a police officer with the Sheriff's Department. Now he's with the Fire Department for the County of Riverside. And he put a flag box outside so we can retire our flags, and the American Legion is going to work with them to make sure they're retired properly. So our newest Eagle Scout, congratulations to him, his parents, and their troop 50, the oldest troop here in the Coachella Valley, based out of here in Indio. And then we also had Acuity Optical that you and I attended, which is a ribbon cutting. It's just right next to the Winchell's Donuts. Nice new facility, optical, 2 pairs of glasses for about $89, $90. So it's a great opportunity for people that need optical care to be able to get some good price glasses there. And then the last thing Mayor Pro Tem Ortiz brought up was that the governor has extended the indoor mask to make sure that people are utilizing when it is. I look at that as an opportunity for us to continue to protect one another. You got to do what you need to do for yourself and your family, including vaccinations. I'm a little concerned and interested that the governor did exempt 3 counties, including San Francisco, San Mateo, and Contra Costa from the mask indoor mandates. And I think if we're in this together, that we all need to be, you need to protect yourself. But, a place that has some of the highest population of homeless and tourism to be exempted from it by anybody, I think is a disservice to the rest of us, because they then continue to go through the rest of California and other areas. So I think it's something we all need to look out for, and we need to protect ourselves and our families by continuing to test if you need to, and also continue to take the measures in place to protect yourself. So hope everyone continues to stay safe, and look forward to hopefully this passing this very shortly. Continue to shop local and continue to look after those you care about. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And all of my boards and commissions were also dark. I did attend a Cutie Optical ribbon cutting. It's great to have a new business. It's a nice, fresh business in that area, right on 111. As we're working on our 111 corridor, it was perfect. It looks beautiful inside, and it was great to meet the family who's going to be running that business. And also, I want to say that recently I've been really focusing on our parks. I know we were talking with DRD and really going to focus on our parks, but I've been out on the weekends walking and talking and doing coffee with some of our homeless folks. We know we do have some challenges in all of our communities. So I've been out walking and talking, and I'd like to thank our Indio Police Department and Fire and Rescue, who I had to dispatch out to one of our parks. There was a gentleman inside of his vehicle who was having some difficulty breathing, and he was not in great shape. And I dialed 911, and our police and fire and rescue got there immediately. We were able to convince the gentleman to accept the assistance, and he was taken to the hospital. So just thank our first responders for being out there, especially right now during this pandemic. And so, you know, that's one of the things. And I talked to the city manager and also the deputy city manager. I'm really going to be working with our community service commission and really focusing on our parks and the parks in our respective districts on some of those challenges that we have. We know we are wanting to do these improvements. We're wanting to partnership with DRD. We wanted to put these art structures in these areas, but we have to make these parks nice and safe for our families and our children. That's what they're meant for. So I just want the public to know we are actively from top all the way around focusing on our parks. And I also, we do have Trinidad Arredondo that's here, and I want to personally thank him as well. We've had a couple of power outages, and he's with IID. He's our governmental affairs specialist executive. And I've had to call him on a couple of occasions. We had some power outages in the community, and he was quick, prompt. IID responded and got our services back up. So I want to thank him for working with us and being so swift and working with our community. You know, it's appreciated. And also, I want to introduce my new sustainability commissioner. She's also in attendance. She could stand, Ms. Doreen Athena Liu. And welcome to the city of Indio. She's here visiting us, and for a future meeting, we'll get you sworn in and get you ready to go. She has a wealth of knowledge. She's going to be great to our commission, and we appreciate you. So thank you. Welcome to the Indio family. And before I conclude, you know, over the years, folks have been wondering, you know, what is Indio going to do with downtown? What are you guys doing down there? Oh, downtown. What's going on in Miles? What's going on in Town Street? What's going on in Smyrna? Just the other day, I had the privilege of talking to a mayor from Inland Empire, and he goes, you know, Mr. Mayor, I grew up in the Coachella Valley, and one thing I've been waiting on is downtown Indio. Well, you know what? January 15th of this year, in a couple of, 10 days, we're going to have our first event of Take Center Stage here at Indio. And it's going to be at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. downtown at our outdoor living room. It's going to be some line dancing, some country music activities for our children, the Sarah Winchester Band and DJ Big John Miller. So, you know, bring your lawn chairs, bring your blankets, dress for the occasion. Downtown Indio is happening. And we just got out of closed session, and it's closed for a reason, so I can't talk about it. But there's some great things coming. There's great things coming. So we're working on it. So save the date, Take Center Stage, January 15, 2020. And that's at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. And we'll also have the Colossal Cacti ribbon cutting at 7 p.m. So you guys get ready because we're moving. So with that being said, that concludes my report, and we'll move on to our next item, which is city manager reports and information. Mr. Montgomery.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank the Mayor Pro Tem as well for bringing up the Saturday redistricting meeting, the workshop. It's not a formal city council meeting, but Saturday at 10 a.m. It will be available by Zoom as well, so we encourage folks to participate. And thank you, Mayor, for mentioning the January 15th event starting at 6 p.m. So a lot going on. With that, we do have two items specifically identified under my report. The first is a presentation by Bird, which is a company that provides electric scooters. They're throughout the country, but right now in the Valley, they have an operation going on in the city of Coachella, and have approached us and wanted to present to you and to the community this concept to see if there's some interest and to answer any questions you might have. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Covado, who is joining us remotely. He's going to be able to share a PowerPoint presentation. Michael, if you have it handy, and Mayor, with your permission, then we'll let him go ahead and make that presentation.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I will share my screen here. Is everyone able to see it?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. As Mr. Montgomery indicated earlier, I am Michael Covado, or Mike, feel free to call me, with the Revenue and Partnerships team of Bird. We are a shared electric mobility company. You might be familiar with us if you've done any traveling into Coachella recently. We specialize in what they call micromobility. So that is the electric scooters, electric bicycles, vehicles of that nature, ideally meant for those sub 5 mile trips, which are about 60% of the trips taken within the United States. Very apropos to what Mayor Pro Temp Ortiz mentioned earlier, our overall mission is to improve the quality of life of residents of cities and businesses, help reduce some of the congestion, help improve air quality, and generally make cities more livable. We're currently active in over 350 cities globally and are the largest shared mobility provider in the world. We're also the first shared mobility provider in the world to be a publicly traded company. The way that our system works is very similar to some of the bike share systems you might already be familiar with. Individuals will download a mobile application on their phone. It is available in several dozen languages, meaning that it will default to the language that the phone is set on, whether that is English, Spanish, whatever, and appear to the user based off of those settings. Individuals will create an account, view a safety tutorial where they're taught safe riding behavior as well as proper parking etiquette, before seeing a scooter either within the community or via the map functionality on the mobile application. They scan the scooter to unlock it, take it where they need to go, which is usually somewhere around 10 to 15 minutes away, before hitting a button to end their ride. Somebody else comes along, does the exact same thing. Functionally, when taking a look at the data, what these systems effectively are is a public transportation system. I know the word scooter can sometimes have a bit of a fun context, but the utilization that we see is very reflective of public transportation. For Indio specifically, what that means is to get directly from point A to point B, you're probably looking at a rough cost of somewhere around $4 to $6. We do have a number of make models of vehicle available, specifically within the electric scooter category. This is our Bird Zero vehicle. It is possible that a different model will be available within Indio, but functionally they are very similar. What I'd like to direct your attention to is the front headlamp, which is available on all of our vehicles, the running lights, tail lights, and brake lights, as well as bell, all safety features, and the decal that you're seeing on the right-hand side, which gives a brief overview of some of the key points in terms of safe riding behavior, as well as contact information that all users, residents, non-users can use to get a hold of us if they ever have any questions or concerns. Every single one of our scooters is equipped with what's known as an IoT device, basically a combination of cellular phone and GPS that allows us to control the speed at which the scooters travel, where they can and cannot go, as well as a bunch of other functionality within them. It is very important for us to build long-lasting relationships with the cities that we do partner with. To be very clear, we are not seeking any investment or any subsidy from the city. This is something where Bird will cover all of the upfront and ongoing costs. As we do feel that long-term, it is somewhere that we can be profitable. Our ask from the city is simply if you will allow us to use the public right-of-way for the deployment of the scooters. What you're seeing here is an example of the fact that even as we come to a launch, we have a series of preparatory calls with city staff to ensure that we are creating the right parameters around our geofencing. Those are the digital boundaries that control where the scooters can and cannot go, as well as provide the contact information for the city's relationship manager, who's the individual that all staff can reach out to on an ongoing basis to make any adjustments for any special events. Like Mr. Mayor, you were mentioning the event in downtown Indio, if that needed to be geo-fenced out so that nobody takes a scooter there, it takes us about 15 to 20 minutes to update those parameters. This means that there is a clear line of communication that you will always have with our organization. One of the ways that we have found to be particularly effective in working with communities similar to Indio, and the way that we can create some direct primary economic benefit through small business creation, is by partnering with local members of the community to act as fleet managers. This is a full-time business where individuals can engage in the deployment, rebalancing, and recharging of the electric scooters. Because we operate on a revenue share basis, this also means that the majority of the money that is generated from the rides actually stays within the Indio community, as it's being provided directly to the fleet managers. Further to that, it also means that the city has the confidence of knowing that there is somebody locally based who can address any concerns or adjust the movement of the scooters if that is necessary in a very fast, very rapid capacity. In terms of the overall impact, almost 60% of our trips do end in front of a small business. What you're seeing here is the national average for the take home of our fleet managers. That is reflective of communities that also include multiple competitors, which you don't see in Indio, as well as saturated markets. What that means is I do think that it can be quite a bit higher in Indio, depending on certain circumstances. The figure that you're seeing at the bottom comes from an independent study from Emory University. They found that over a 6-month period, every single e-scooter contributed to an additional, initially they calculated it at $921 per e-scooter in spending at local businesses. They have since revised that number to a little bit closer to $1,100. To put that into context, if you were to talk about a fleet of 100 scooters within Indio, that would mean at the 8.75% tax rate, you're looking at about $192,000 in additional taxes being generated solely through some additional spending happening within the community. To say nothing of the taxation also happening on the rides. As was mentioned, we are active in Coachella. To give a little bit of an example for a neighboring city, we launched at the end of May, beginning of June, so roughly 6 months ago. In that time, we have seen over 22,800 rides. We have almost 10,000 unique users, with roughly 1,000 of those regular commuters. The users have circled the circumference of the globe almost twice in terms of the miles traveled on our scooters. I think that's a clear indicator of some of the benefit that this can generate for the community. Because we were the first shared electric scooter company in the world, it also means that we have an advantage with respect to our technology. So our geofencing and geospeed I've alluded to controls where the scooters can and cannot go. We were the first organization also to create a feature that we call helmet selfies. If an individual photographs themselves at the end of their ride wearing a helmet, they receive a credit to their next ride. It's one of the ways that we encourage safe riding behavior. This is done in connection with an ongoing free helmet giveaway throughout the entire continental United States. An individual can go directly through our app or website and have a helmet shipped to their door for no other fees other than the $9.95 shipping and handling. We do have quite a sophisticated technological capacity to control where the scooters can park under certain circumstances. So if you do have special events, that means that we can limit where individuals can park during those events and direct them to particular locations where the scooters might not create any kind of inconvenience. We do offer a number of other features within certain make models of scooters, including our warm-up mode. This reduces the maximum speed of the scooters, which is currently capped at 15 miles per hour. That is what the state requires, and is roughly what your average amateur bicyclist travels at, down to 6 miles per hour for new users until they get a little bit more familiarity and confidence with the system, at which point it gradually increases with time. Quick start is for the regular commuter. What it means is that they can simply approach a scooter and the system will automatically know that based off of their travel patterns, they need to use this to get to somewhere very close or somewhere that they need to get to during this time period, and will automatically lock the scooter when they leave. Just one of those convenience features that we do for individuals that are regularly coming back to the system itself. I do want to make sure that I leave some time here for questions, as I believe there are certain things that will be specific within Indio that I'd be happy to address. With that being said, Mr. Mayor, as you're leading the council session this evening, this is the appropriate period for Q&A. I'd be happy to address any questions.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Cavato. Does anyone have any questions? All right, council. Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mike, for your presentation. I think we talked one time before. Do appreciate you bring this to us. So I understand your boundaries and everything else. So since Coachella has the scooters already, would they be able to then, if we wanted to do the boundaries, bring it from Coachella into because you'd go through an area that we're connected to them, that to be able to utilize scooters back and forth between the two cities if they agreed to it and we agreed to it, or how does that work?
Yes, absolutely. So we could create a commuting channel so that would enable individuals to go from one city to the other and back and forth.
As long as they're
both
connected
cities agree.
to each other. Okay. And then you said that the management of them, I think one of the biggest problems that a lot of people see is they're dumped on the side of the road, there's dumped at different places. How do you continue to keep them up where they're safe and not a problem for other issues? And if they're being driven unsafely, obviously you have the geospeed and the other stuff, but is there some mechanism to keep them in an area where it doesn't become a clutter or an issue for the city itself? I mean, we just don't want them put here and there. I mean, how do you keep it? I understand your management, but there's so many of them in an area. How would you do that?
Excellent question. I think the best solution would be to start with a very small fleet. If you are talking about the thousands of scooters that you might see within Los Angeles or San Diego, certainly that can create some issues around clutter. If we are very measured in terms of our initial deployment and have a sufficient level of density that individuals can still see this as a reliable public transportation option without overwhelming the community to create those issues around clutter, we mitigate a lot of that risk. You also alluded to our fleet manager. What that means is that somebody is actually going to be checking on every single active scooter multiple times per day and making sure that they don't end up being unsightly, left in places where they might create a nuisance, and being moved to locations where they are more likely to be used again, thus delivering more benefit to the community.
Okay, and then one last question. When we have large events, like we have the Coachella Fest and Stagecoach and other events, Tamale Festival, Date Festival, would there be an opportunity to bring in more scooters on a temporary basis to help for events like that if we want to transportation? Some of our biggest problems, and I don't know if it's safe or not considering the amount of people, but if we could get more people to point A to point B without cars or other stuff where they might be able to utilize some of the other stuff, would that be an opportunity?
Absolutely. Moreover, we can work with city staff to make sure that we're identifying the correct places to have people end their trip, so that there are some very clear routes that we are encouraging individuals to take to please end up in the right locations without creating any kind of as I mentioned before, nuisance.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember Miller.
Yeah, Councilmember Holmes. No questions, Councilmember Meade.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do have a few questions. I have seen these scooters throughout various communities, large and small. I'm not so much concerned about the cluttering issue because I understand that there is a fleet manager. What I'd like to ask is, for a city of approximately our size and the level of activity that we have both seasonally and off-seasonally, would that mean there would be one fleet manager, two fleet managers? How does someone even inquire about being a fleet manager? I guess would be my first question.
Excellent question. So we will run various social media campaigns to ensure that people are aware that this is an opportunity available. We also approach specific local businesses that we've previously identified as being potentially good fits for this type of a partnership. We do have close to 2,000 partnerships of this nature now nationally, so certainly it's something we have quite a bit of skill and ability in terms of sourcing. There is a rather rigorous qualification process that individuals will be required to go through before becoming a fleet manager. Part of that is because we want to ensure we do have the right individuals in place to address all the needs of the community and make sure we are delivering on the level of service that we want to see within Indio. In terms of how many fleet managers, that would ultimately be determined by not only the level of resources these individuals bring. If you have, for example, a logistics company, they might be able to handle a larger fleet than somebody who has less resources available to them, but also the overall size of the fleet. For a fleet of, say, roughly 100 scooters to start, you would look at most likely 1 to 2 fleet managers. Well, not most likely, you would definitely look at 2 fleet managers in that instance.
All right. And then the other question is that not our entire city has sidewalk accessibility. We're not improved in a way that a urban or downtown city is. We're more rural and spread out. So I understand that your geo-fencing is what will initially dictate where the scooters can migrate, which thank you for the information that we can change the geo-fencing within 15 minutes. But do these scooters require to stay on sidewalks and major improved thoroughfares?
Not necessarily, no. So generally speaking, treat them like you would a bicycle. That's about what 99% of the state regulation boils down to. There is regulation that allows for them to be parked in locations where there is no sidewalk. However, in general, where I think you'll likely see individuals using these is probably within a number of predictable commuting corridors within the downtown area, within some of those commercial zones, and then outward to some of the residential areas when they need to get home at the end of the day. That means that it's unlikely that you'll find a lot of the scooters collecting in those less developed areas. However, if that is somewhere where we see a lot of need or a lot of demand coming from, we can work with the city to create designated areas in terms of where the scooters can be parked.
Great, great, great. So I really appreciate the level of detail that you've shared with me. And to hear that you've had a 6-month trial or prototype period with the city of Coachella really helps me understand the way that you operate, because I understand how Coachella has areas that are developed and undeveloped, and it's certainly a much smaller area than we're looking at here in Indio. But I think what would be key in our area is your ability to respond based on increased demands around festivals. Initially, we had to have some serious conversations with people like Uber and some of the taxi franchises because they were not able to meet the needs of the consumers during those periods of times. So if you've already pinpointed how our demands will fluctuate, I think that your responsiveness might work for our city. So thank you for answering the questions before actually I made the questions. I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you, Councilmember Emmy.
Great. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation again. And I do think that this sounds like a good deal for us here, especially, I think it'd be a good addition for our bus stops with Sunline, helping people get to those bus stops, especially during the heat, right? If they can get there a little faster, I think that'd be make commuting a lot easier for some of our residents here. Also think, great for the environment, right? If we're reducing how much people are using cars throughout our city, especially for those short rides where you don't really need a car and you can get there quickly on a scooter. That sounds pretty great. Let's see. And for our local businesses, I think as we expand our downtown, this is going to be great for our COD students, for our small businesses down there, and for all the workers there, even in the county buildings that live here in the city. I think this is a great addition for our commuting options here in the city. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Cavato. You answered my questions before I had a chance to ask them, so that's great. And I really like the technology component of the devices, or scooters, I should say. And it was mentioned about our festivals getting folks from point A to point B. And that's something that we've discussed. We've invested in our infrastructure in respects to our bike lanes and those things in some of our communities, and getting folks, maybe from our festival areas to downtown to our marketplace. I think these are, could aid in that. And you really gave a great presentation. I had to do a little homework on them. I had some of the concerns as well, as we see in, the bigger metropolitan cities, but I've also been in smaller communities where they had designated locations where they were stored, and they were nice, and the areas were well lit and painted, and to get it's another form of sustainable transportation. So thank you for that presentation. I don't think this is all informational, correct, City Manager? So
Yeah, I think Councilmember Holmes had a little connectivity issues, but she's back on now, may have a question or two.
yes, Councilmember.
Hi, and I'm sorry if these questions have been answered, please, I can talk with the mayor. But I think it's a great concept, a great idea, but there are some things and maybe this is more for my fellow council members. But how do we ensure the safety of pedestrians? If these are going to be ridden, on the sidewalks and or the streets, there's some safety concerns, as this is something we looked into quite a few years ago, and we looked at cities like San Diego, much larger than Indio, of course, but nevertheless, I mean, we recently, several months ago, had a bicycle event, and you couldn't walk down the sidewalks. It was physically dangerous because of the bicycles zooming up and down the sidewalk. So that would be a concern of mine in terms of how to manage and control that. And the other part is the injury. I am well aware that sometimes there's a increase in some of the challenges with broken arms, broken legs, head injuries, etc. I love what you've done with a helmet. I think that's huge strides from where we were a few months ago. I guess what I really want to say to my fellow council member and staff is, while I think this is a great idea, I would like us to sort of figure out how to ensure that the folks riding them are safe and that our community is safe. And I would ask you, Michael, what examples have you seen in other communities just to ensure the safety of everyone?
Excellent question. So safety is our paramount concern as well. We want to ensure that we are creating an environment that is as safe as possible for all of our riders and for all residents within the communities that we are working with. First and foremost, I think it's important to take a look at some of the data around safety. So the city of Portland, the city of Miami, the city of Austin all did independent studies, as did the International Transport Forum in 2019 and 2020. Every single one of those studies found parity in the incident rate for injuries on e-scooters as the incident rate for injuries on bicycles, meaning e-scooters are going to be about as safe as bicycles. Moreover, in 2020, the International Transport Forum, which is a collection of transit agencies from 60 member countries, actually went further and has suggested that cities explore e-scooters specifically as an alternative transportation option, simply because of the data that they were seeing with respect to utilization, safety, etc. So I think this is something that people are recognizing as being a viable option without creating an environment that could be overly detrimental. When you combine the technology that we have around controlling where the scooters are allowed to go, controlling at what speed they travel at, and being very dynamic around special events, you mentioned, for example, the bicycle event. If there's anything where there might be heavy congestion, the city's relationship manager, that's a person that all city staff, all council members are able to reach out to at any time, can make those adjustments very, very quickly. It's that 15 to 20 minute time period that you mentioned yourself, so that we aren't creating an environment where there is a high level of risk.
Thank you. I look forward to the opportunity of exploring this more and making sure that everyone in our community is safe as well and fun. This is just a great opportunity for us to get from point A to point B, as Mayor Pro Tem said, the college, the courthouse, and certainly the concerts, and just I have a list of probably 20 things. So I look forward to further conversation.
Thank you, Councilmember Holmes. We're similarly excited.
Great, Manager.
There is an agreement that is a template that Burb uses utilizing Coachella and these other communities. Unless there's further research you'd like the staff to do, we propose to put the agreement on the agenda for the council to explore it further and give us that direction one way or the other. So unless there's disagreement, I think that's our intent.
Yeah.
Councilmember Amit has a question there.
So where is this agreement, City Manager?
Well, we haven't presented it yet, but
Okay.
knowing that appears there's interest, we'll do so. Certainly, we don't want to run it through the city attorney's office, but it's something that's been used in other communities. So I've seen a draft. It's pretty boilerplate, but again, there's no risk or cost or liability to the city as outlined in the draft. But you'll see that perhaps even the next meeting if there's no disagreement with that.
Well, my question, and this is in the back of my mind, is this like a franchise agreement or what kind of an agreement? What is the benefit to the city other than the community benefit?
Mike, you might best be able to answer that question, and the city attorney might have a comment.
Absolutely. There is considerable community benefit, as you've mentioned, Councilmember Amit. Additionally, there is that secondary financial benefit through the additional taxation that will be coming through. I believe at least 1% goes directly to Indio through the tax. Should the city be interested, we're more than happy to explore a license fee at the onset to help offset some of the cost of the city exploration within this initiative. It's something that we're happy to work with city staff to make sure that we find the appropriate figure to, in order to not necessarily blow the financial projections out of the water for us.
Right, we wouldn't want to do that, but we want to know what opportunities there are for the financial side for the city, aside from the public benefit. Thank you.
Completely understand.
And if I can jump in, there was legislation that was adopted in 2020 that actually is in effect as of January 1st, 2021, that if we allow what's called shared mobility service providers, we need to adopt rules for the operation, parking, and maintenance. And that can either be by ordinance or it can be placed in the agreement. So we would have to include that as well and make sure that there's insurance and some other requirements.
So I think the thing here is, do we have a consensus of city manager staff moving forward with this draft agreement, correct?
I sense there enough for us to present it then, and you can further discuss it, further evaluate any of these components. We'll get with Michael on some of that processing cost to make sure that we're taking care of that way and present it to you soon.
Do we have any further from council? If we're good. Good. Thank you, Mr. Cavato and city manager. I think we're good on that. Yeah,
we are. I just have one real quick other item before we begin the regular meeting, the other parts of the meeting. Just a quick PowerPoint to provide everyone an update on our very elongated strategic planning process. There are many reasons why it's been this way, but I think important to explain where we're at this juncture. And just pulling this up quickly. Have I started clicking too soon? So we have recently sought public input through the Indio Live e-newsletter and social media, received some very good questions and comments, as I've included my own email for residents to provide input. We have prepared a draft tracking sheet for where we think we're at with the draft strategic plan. This is not the final document, but an important part of the detail in this tracking sheet, and I'll show you in a minute, is to come to the estimated costs of these items, because that is the next step as we present to you these items that would all be cool to make Indio an even better community, but there is a cost attached to that, and that's the time where the council can prioritize the one-time also recurring costs relative to each one of these projects. Some things, as you might imagine, might have to fall out because of cost, but that's where we're at. And so to give you an example, public safety is an area of focus. So you see in action item 1A relates to the public safety campus. The spreadsheet that will help us track accountability to both you as well as the residents and staff of that public safety campus is to designate a lead staff person. There's a project team. It's more beyond those names there, but those are the key members of the project team. What is the estimated new cost, meaning not already budgeted? What's our estimated completion date? What's the next step? And then any comments. So literally the spreadsheet's at 85 pages right now, but it gives you some idea of what staff is pulling together to make sure there's a very organized and clear process with identified costs and accountability. And when you finally adopt whatever those action items are, you'll know what those estimated costs are, and we will be able to track the progress with you. There'll never be a doubt of where are we at with these projects. Here's another example, I believe this one's under IWA, for example, because I see Mr. Trejo's name. So ensuring safe drinking water, water quality, you see Mr. Trejo as a lead. He's estimating that no additional cost from what's currently budgeted and so forth. So I just want to let you know that this is going on behind the scenes and it's something that we'll be able to present to you soon. That spreadsheet, tracking sheet will be completed, will be presented to you for the prioritization. What stays in, what stays out. Cost is a major factor there, but perhaps not the only factor. And then based on that council input and your prioritization at that subsequent meeting, we would then be able to bring a document to you and to the community, and you could formally adopt it. And that spreadsheet I showed to you would be a mechanism for us to continue to track the progress of each one of those projects, whether it be a capital project, a program, or some specific effort. So with that, Mayor, just provides a brief update of where we're at, knowing that that's going on behind the scenes. And if there are not other questions, that completes my report.
Do we have any questions of the city manager?
Brian, thank you. So I see it's by department. So when we get it all done, obviously the fire department, police department, safety campus is going to be a bond issue. I anticipate we're not going to pay as we go along. I anticipate we'll bond with it and multiple things. So when we think about it, we got to think about what we're going to throw all in at one time, considering I see the bond, pricing right now at the interest is very low. I have a distinct feeling it's going to go up. So I think we really need to think long and hard on where we're going to be able to take that money to be able to utilize it and put as much in it at one time. We might take 3 or 5 years to use it, but I'd rather pay $4 or $5 million at 2.5% than I would to go up a little bit higher. So I think we need to really look at, what we're willing to do in terms of putting bonding funding aside, knowing that we have other things like paving and road work that we're going to have to continue to do on maintenance. So it's going to be that balance point, because when you look at that, everybody's going to get their eyes glazed over because they want it all, but we're only going to be able to afford so much. And we still got to leave a lot for whatever we build, we got to maintain. That's been one of the biggest problems and the issues with Indio is we've been building stuff like our parks is a good example and haven't been able to maintain them. Our roads is another good example. We went off one year and spent it, fixed all of them, and then didn't repave them. So we really got to think long and hard to make sure we don't put the city staff in any kind of disappointment terms when they go to get other projects ready to go, knowing that there isn't any cash. So you're going to have to help lead us, you and Rob, to be honest with you.
Great point. Relative to the financing, we do have this opportunity because the campus is just getting ready to bid. We can find some great economies to look at these other needs and take advantage of these low interest rates. We can get more accomplished. We do establish a debt service cost, but not the entire cost up front. And all of our residents in the future will be able to share in the cost rather than just those that are currently living here. So it is a mechanism we'll present to you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Any further questions of the city manager?
Yes, I have questions. May I proceed?
Yes, Councilmember.
Thank you, Mayor. In addition to breaking down the costs by department, I think you need to segregate those costs that are potentially covered through a bond measure. We need to see what that total is. So if you could please also segregate those potential bond items, I would appreciate it. And also, I made this comment last time, and I'll make it again. Any items that are a given, like safe drinking water, why does that need to be a priority? Like, if we're not doing our job, then we have no right being a municipality. So please take things off of that list that are obvious givens that if we're not doing them, then we have no right to be a governmental agency. We need to shorten the list down so that we can take into consideration the serious priorities, because we can't have 100 priorities, 75 priorities, 50 priorities, 25 priorities. We need to narrow the priorities down. And the better you can do as a staff to minimize the priorities that we need to consider, the better we can make a decision. So please do that for us in the next presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, I think one effort that you'll see in the spreadsheet as she refers to is if there is no additional cost, it's kind of a routine ongoing item. Those are the ones that she's referring to that can drop off. If, for example, safe drinking water is there's a cost and an added component that the council wants us to consider, then we should consider that and identify what that cost is, and you can prioritize that amongst the revenues within IWA. That's one example. So yes, we will identify those, and certainly some of these items I think can drop off if there's just something we're going to do anyway, with no additional cost.
Councilmember Holmes?
And so I concur with both. I think the strategic plan can be a roadmap for council and for staff, but I appreciate and value the wisdom of something a little bit more condensed for us to be able to wrap our arms around and make decisions on and prioritize. But I completely agree. We're in a sweet spot in terms of interest rates. So for us to be able to look at our finances very carefully, look at the low interest rates, make some decisions so that we can act in the best interest of our community and take advantage of those interest rates. I think it really behooves us to move forward in that manner. And I concur. You and Rob really have that crystal ball, for lack of a better description. You have the knowledge and the expertise and the history, and then to take a look at what's happening now and what it looks like 10 and 20 years from now and how it will enhance or affect our community, I think is immensely valuable. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember. Mayor Pro Tem, you have any questions or comments?
I just want to say thank you to staff. I really appreciate the organization that goes behind this and getting this all into one document for us to be able to compare these projects and compare these prices. So really appreciate that. I did want to make sure that we're including two numbers that I know we need to include are the skate park for Miles Park and a dog park for Miles Park. So if we can definitely have those on the final version of this document, I really appreciate that. And that's all I have. Thanks.
City Manager, I think that's it.
Thank you.
All righty, appreciate it. The next item is consent calendar. And if no one wants to pull anything, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent calendar as presented, item 8.1 through 8.7.
And I'll second that.
We have a motion by Councilmember Miller and a second by Councilmember Holmes. Could I get a vote, please?
Councilmember Holmes,
Aye.
Councilmember Miller,
Aye.
Councilmember Ramos Amit,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ortiz.
Aye, and I did just want to say thank you to our staff here as well for the proposals for the project for the city chambers, and also for their work on getting the MOU ready for the Desert Rec. Really appreciate that.
And Mayor Furman.
Aye. Consent calendar passes as is, and we'll move on to the next item. Next item is public hearing item 9.1, resolution 10254, approving a general plan amendment adopting the housing element 2021 to 2029 and adopting a negative declaration. And I believe this is Mr. Snyder will be handling this. There he is.
Sure.
It's virtual.
I'm virtual today. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of City Council. For the record, Kevin Snyder, Director of Community Development. This evening, I'm pleased to present to you for your consideration, and upon the recommendation of your Planning Commission, a general plan amendment for the housing element update. As the council is aware, city staff and our consultant team have been working on an update to our required housing element, which is an element of the general plan, for almost the last year. And in that regard, I just want to make a couple of quick points, and then I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth and Erica with Dudek, who are going to take you through a presentation, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions. But a couple of things to just set the context for this hearing. One, as I mentioned, this is a required element of our general plan. Our general plan 2040 was adopted in September 2019. We have an existing housing element. It was certified by the state, but every 8 years, the state requires us to update our housing element. In October 2020, we received our what are called regional housing need assessment numbers. And those numbers specified that we had to plan for 7,812 housing units, of which 2,963 needed to be affordable. That is not a lot of time, to be honest with you, because our deadline for adoption is technically October 2021, but because we had a certified housing element, we got a 90-day extension, which is why we're before you this evening. I want to make a point that the housing element is not the solution to the housing needs and issues of our community. It is a roadmap. We have a required format and content of the housing element that the state requires all jurisdictions to do. There are programs and actions that are identified that will help the city facilitate addressing the housing needs of our community. However, it will not solve the housing needs of our community. As we've mentioned to you in the past, there is a second phase of this work that is called pro-housing strategies. And that is an effort to actually get into strategic conversations with the council and the community about what can the city do reasonably, prudently, and financially to support continued housing production in the community, particularly affordable housing, and also what is often referred to as missing middle housing, the housing for the workforce members of our community that might include teachers or police officers or other such professions. So I just want to reiterate that this will not necessarily present a solution to our housing crisis. It will present a roadmap. Finally, I want to note that we literally sprinted from October 2020 to today. We did extensive outreach in the middle of a pandemic. And while I know some may feel that we didn't do enough, given the constraints that we were operating under with limited in-person attendance, I'm very confident and pleased that our outreach efforts were very robust, and also that we involved as many members of the community that wanted to be involved. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Erica Van Sickle and Elizabeth Dixon with DUDEC, and they're going to give you a presentation, as I mentioned before, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions that the council might have. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, planning commissioners. Just one moment while I share my screen.
I think Erica meant city council members.
I am so sorry that I'm very sorry. It's been a long day. Just one moment here.
It's okay. You're perfectly fine. I do it all the time.
All right. I apologize. All right. There we go. All right. Well, I'll jump in and get started. Good evening, City Council. My name is Erica Van Sickle, and I'm here today with my colleague, Elizabeth Dixon. I think we've all met before, but we are members of the DUDEC consulting team. And as Kevin Snyder mentioned, we've been working very closely with city staff to prepare an amendment to your general plan. And we are here tonight to support city staff in presenting the general plan amendment relative to the housing element and the associated CEQA documentation. So just a quick overview, what we'll be covering. We will start with introductions, provide an overview of the project, then review the components of housing element, and then pause for any remaining questions. So in addition to myself and Elizabeth Dixon, this project is being led by staff from the city's community development department, including Kevin Snyder and Jesus Gomez. And so today we're bringing before you an amendment to the general plan, which is the document that states the overall vision for how your city is going to grow and develop over time. And it sets out policies for the various elements of the general plan. This amendment is specifically to update the city's housing element as is required for the next 6 cycle period of 2021 to 2029, and an initial study, a negative declaration in accordance with CEQA. Staff's recommendation is that the City Council adopt the housing element as well as certify the negative declaration. So the housing element is an element of the general plan, as I've mentioned, which is required to be updated every 8 years. And so now we're entering into the 6th required iteration of the housing element, which we refer to simply as the 6th cycle. And the housing element contains the goals, policies, and actions to address the comprehensive housing needs of all current and anticipated residents across all income levels for the next 8 years. And so the housing element update is an extensive planning process. It consists of several stages and components. And the stakeholder and community engagement is listed first because that goes on throughout the update process. We start by reviewing the previous housing element and update all the background documentation, which includes a needs assessment, which provides a profile of demographic and housing related data in the city, an analysis of fair housing, which looks at fair housing through outreach, enforcement, current and historical land use patterns and any disproportionate needs that may exist, and an analysis of the city's regulations and governmental and non-governmental market constraints to development. And we conduct an inventory of the city's land through the sites analysis to demonstrate the sites that are available and can accommodate housing to ensure that there's a sufficient capacity for development to meet the city's needs. And the final housing element consists of an action plan that contains goals, policies, and programs, which we'll get into a bit later, which are recommended actions to be taken over the next 8 years to assist in meeting the city's housing needs. And this may look familiar to some, but just as a refresher, a quick review on what the goals, policies, objectives, and programs are and how they interrelate with one another. Goals provide the long-term vision and serve as the foundation of the plan. So they're broad statements of what the city and its residents hope to achieve over the period of time. And the policies are statements that will guide the decision-making to implement those goals. And the objectives are specific and measurable action-oriented statements that mark progress toward the goal. So programs are specific implementable actions that will carry out the policies and over the next 8 years, as I've mentioned. And so to start off broadly, let's look at the regional housing needs allocation, also known as the RHNA, which I've mentioned. And so there's a few ways that a city can plan for the RHNA. We'll jump into that in a moment, but just to look at your numbers, we have the lower income units, which includes extremely low, very low, and low income, and that's 2,963 units. We have moderate income units, which is 1,315. We have the above moderate income, which is 3,534. And as a note, this does not include the buffer that HCD requires between 15 and 30% in addition to those lower and moderate income units to ensure that capacity can remain throughout the 8-year period. And as previously mentioned, so one of the key components of the housing element includes the sites analysis and inventory. And while the city is not responsible for building the actual housing, the cities must make the sites available for housing in a manner that makes the RHNA targets we just reviewed possible. So India's total RHNA is 7,812. And again, that does not include the recommended buffer. And the buffer is needed to ensure that there's enough capacity throughout the cycle. And so that's why you need to plan for additional lower and moderate income units. And so one thing to consider is that there are very specific criteria that sites must meet to qualify for the lower income RHNA that are set out by the state. So if development comes in at a density lower than what's been identified for any one of those sites that qualify for lower income specifically, the city will quickly have an issue with capacity, which is why the buffer is so important. And so very, very generally, two of the largest criteria set out by the state for lower income are that the sites must be between 0.5 acre to 10 acres, and they must be a default density of at least 20 dwelling units per acre. So they must allow at least 20 dwelling units per acre. And so here, this map shown here just demonstrates all the vacant and underutilized sites identified that I explained, and I'll break down on the next slides. So we're talking a lot about capacity, but let's get into what the numbers look like. And so these are the numbers to go with the map and figure we just looked at. And so when you factor in the pipeline projects, projection of ADUs to be developed, and vacant and underutilized capacity, you end up with 9,859 units toward the above moderate income RHNA of 3,534. We have 661 units towards the moderate income RHNA of 1,315 and 677 units towards the lower income RHNA of 2,963. As shown here under the existing zoning regulations, the city does not have the capacity to accommodate the lower and moderate income RHNA. This is because currently only the downtown specific plan allows for density at the default density of 20 dwelling units per acre. However, because the city is currently in the process of updating its zoning ordinance, new total capacity was calculated based on those updated zoning regulations, which are expected to be adopted pretty soon. And so this new capacity after the sites are rezoned will provide an additional capacity of 3,160 lower income units and 947 moderate income units. So once we factor in the qualifying sites from the rezone, you end up with a very generous buffer of 874 lower income units and 293 moderate income units. So in a way, the city is already ahead of the cycle. And so because the zoning code was not adopted before the deadline of October 15th, a program was included in the housing element that commits the city to making these sites available, but that should be no problem. And so speaking of the programs, I'll now hand it over to my colleague Elizabeth for a review of the outreach conducted, the housing goals and programs, and a look at some pro-housing work coming up.
All right, thank you, Erica. And as Erica mentioned, my name is Elizabeth Dixon. I'm a planner with Dudek. And so now I'm going to provide just a quick recap of the outreach that was conducted for this housing element update, and then get into some of the key components of the housing element with a review of the programs. So extensive public outreach was conducted throughout the planning process. In addition to an online survey available in English and Spanish, and 2 City Council and Planning Commission meetings, the city held 3 public workshops with live translations in Spanish, 1 stakeholder community meeting, which was open to the public and to community stakeholders, and a total of 8 individual and small group stakeholder interviews, which were also open to all members of the public. The city also mailed a flyer to all households in Indio with information for the public meetings in both Spanish and English. And then the city promoted the meetings and public review opportunities on a dedicated webpage for the project through an email newsletter for interested participants and on the city's social media platforms, including live streaming meetings to Facebook. Appendix F of the housing element, which is included as an attachment to the agenda item, provides a detailed summary of the outreach conducted and the feedback received. The results of the outreach efforts were carefully considered in the preparation of the housing element itself, particularly as it relates to the goals, policies, and programs, which I'll now go into detail on. So the housing elements programs focus on 6 main goals, which are shown on the screen here. These include an adequate supply and diverse range of housing types that align with the needs of all households, an affordable housing supply that meets the needs of extremely low, very low, low, and moderate income households, a well-maintained and preserved housing stock, rental and ownership housing opportunities at all income levels, enhanced quality of life free from displacement, and a city that promotes equality and inclusivity. So I'll now go into detail on the programs of the housing element, and these programs are the steps that the city will take throughout the housing element period to achieve these greater goals and to help the city achieve the RHNA targets, so those housing unit targets that Erica went into detail on. So programs of the housing element include many ongoing efforts, such as the zoning code update, as they are anticipated to be completed during this housing element period. Additionally, many programs of the housing element are included in response to recent legislative changes. Programs to provide an adequate supply and a variety of housing types include updates to the density bonus program. This is in response to changes in state law where additional incentives beyond those required can be considered. An update to the city's development fees, which can include an evaluation of opportunities to reduce fees in exchange for affordable housing development. An update to the zoning code to increase flexibility in development standards for residential uses and to accommodate the RHNA and buffer through the densities identified in the 2040 general plan. An incentive for lot consolidation, which is needed to facilitate the development of affordable housing, especially downtown on smaller lots. And on those sites that were identified in the last 2 housing element cycles and are being re-identified, a program is needed to allow by right development where 20% or more of the units will be affordable to lower income households. All right. And because the state has been pretty busy as it relates to housing, which I mentioned, a lot of these programs are related to those legislative updates to help meet the varying needs of the population. So the first program listed here is related to accessory dwelling units. This includes needed updates for the provision of accessory dwelling units, resources to assist homeowners with the development of accessory dwelling units, and an incentive for the development of accessory dwelling units that may be made affordable to lower income households. Next, we have emergency shelters. These must be permitted by right in at least one zone, and parking requirements must ensure that they are calculated based on the demonstrated need to accommodate the staff. The employee and farm worker housing program of the housing element, this ensures that employee housing is permitted with the same regulations as single family residences in the same zones. And then supportive housing meeting specific requirements must be permitted in residential and mixed use zones. Low barrier navigation centers, these connect those experiencing homelessness to support programs. This will be incorporated into the zoning code. Large community care facilities serving 7 or more persons should be permitted in at least one zone without discretion. And housing on religious sites provides a process by which religious institutions can receive parking reductions in exchange for affordable housing. And you'll notice on the slide here, those that are tied to specific legislation, it's cited next to each of those points on the slide. All right, programs related to updates to existing processes and ongoing monitoring throughout the planning period include the provision of permit streamlining for qualifying projects under SB 35, ensuring that relevant development requirements are provided online and are updated as needed to ensure transparency. Again, we've got the legislation there on the slide. A survey of the housing stock to determine the condition of housing. Continued pursuit of grant applications to identify funding to support affordable housing production. Continue to track the capacity for housing throughout the planning period to ensure no net loss of capacity. And when we say no net loss, this is tied to specific legislation. And Erica mentioned the buffer that will be included, and that will help make sure that you don't run into any issues related to no net loss. So making sure that you have adequate capacity throughout the planning period to meet your remaining RHNA target. Replacement requirements in the event that a property is redeveloped, and monitoring new design standards to ensure that they are objective. All right, just a couple more here. Programs related to housing assistance for households include housing rehabilitation. The city provides housing rehabilitation support to eligible residents through the current minor home repair program. This program sets out to seek new funding to support housing rehabilitation. The Housing Choice Vouchers program commits the city to continued participation with the Housing Authority. And Homeownership Opportunities coordinates with developers and housing nonprofits to explore opportunities for creative ownership models or affordable ownership development. Programs that increase housing opportunities for all populations and increase quality of life include increased accessibility, which aims to connect developers and residents to accessibility resources, such as home retrofit guides and universal design standards that can increase in-unit accessibility, among other housing-related information and resources. Reasonable accommodations. This will ensure a procedure is provided in the event that a deviation from existing regulations is needed to meet the needs for those with disabilities. Preservation of at-risk affordable housing, which includes collaboration with the Housing Authority and the Coachella Valley Housing Coalition. And when we say at-risk affordable housing, these are affordable housing developments where there may be an expiring covenant or an agreement. Consideration for the establishment of a housing trust fund to increase the city's access to state and federal grants and to allocate funds for affordable housing. Through this, the city can explore possible funding sources. An analysis to look at the feasibility of inclusionary zoning, which could potentially serve as a funding stream for affordable housing, which then connects back to the housing trust fund. And place-based strategies that prioritize planning efforts in a manner that advances fair housing access and opportunity for upward mobility. And the last program slide here before we get into next steps. These are programs to increase coordination and partnerships, and they include an annual housing forum where the city can discuss the progress made towards the housing element through discussion of the annual housing element progress reports. Fostering partnerships, which is incorporated through several programs of the housing element to identify opportunities for coordination among agencies and organizations. Providing information on available resources and programs online to better connect residents to what is available. Education on fair housing and accessibility. This is also included throughout the housing element and can be paired with annual housing forums, and resources can be provided on the city's website. And then continuing to partner with the Inland Fair Housing and Mediation Board for fair housing services and providing referrals. All right, I know that was a lot of information, so thank you for your patience. I'm going to wrap things up with what those next steps will be. So Kevin did mention the pro-housing work to come. The pro-housing work will trail the housing element and will include a fiscal analysis that will look at financing opportunities. We'll look at opportunities for affordable housing and workplace housing. When I say workplace housing, this is commonly known as workforce housing, although workplace is a more preferred term. And then it will look at best practices as it relates to pro-housing. And then the final steps of this housing element update process are listed here on this slide. We've incorporated the comments received during the public review period and HCD's review. And the finalized draft housing element is what is before you this evening. We've brought this item before the Planning Commission where they unanimously recommended your approval. And we are here tonight requesting that you adopt the general plan amendment for the housing element and to certify the initial study negative declaration pursuant to CEQA. And then finally, upon adoption, the housing element will go back to HCD for their final review and certification, which can take up to 90 days. And this concludes our presentation. Thank you, and we look forward to hearing your questions and comments.
Great, thank you. This is a public hearing item, so I will open the public hearing and see if we have any public comments.
No comments, Mayor.
We have no public comments for this hearing item, so I will close the public hearing and open it up to the council for questions and discussion. So we'll go ahead and start. I see Councilmember Ramin had her hand raised. Councilmember.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand that this general plan amendment, which is general plan amendment number 1, is moving forward to conform with the RENA numbers or the RENA position that we're in. The first comment I wanted to make is that we do have a housing trust established here in the Coachella Valley. It was established 10 years ago by CVAG. So the city of Indio is already a partner in that housing trust. I'm the representative on that housing trust. The challenge we've had to date is the funding mechanism. So that's the first piece of information I wanted to share. The second piece of information or question that I have is that when we approved the general plan last year or the year before, we gave staff direction to come back with an amendment because we were hesitant to pass the general plan without making an adjustment to the Polo area, the southern Polo area, to include increased density and transitional zones between the Polo grounds and what would be the end of the Polo area, which is around Avenue 48. So my question is to Mr. Snyder, is that the next step in his staff's focus? Will that be general plan amendment number 2? At the time, the answer we received from staff was that the studies needed to be concluded in order for us to move in that direction. But I'm hearing tonight that we're moving forward with general plan amendment number 1 for the housing element with a negative declaration. So why is it that we couldn't move forward with a negative declaration for the requests that we made for increased housing and transitional zones in the Southern Estates area?
Thank you, Councilmember. What you're referring to specifically was there was 20 acres that the owners of those 20 acres had approached the city council during the general plan adoption process and asked for the council's consideration of increased density on those properties because they were identified for Desert Estates neighborhood zoning, which would have been extremely low density. So at the time of adoption, council did authorize the expenditure of up to $30,000 for required environmental work. That environmental work has been done. My challenge has been, in all honesty, as the council is aware, we had a significant reduction in staffing in the planning division, and I am just now almost back to full staffing. And so my intent now is to be able to proceed with bringing that forward to your planning commission for their review and consideration. Also, I should have mentioned first meeting with the property owners who brought you that request, getting their feedback, then going to the planning commission, and then ultimately bringing this through the formal process of public hearing before the planning commission and ultimately the city council. So that work has not been completed, but it is now at a point, at least where I have the resources to bring that back through the process. And I apologize for the delay, but unfortunately it could not be helped.
No, I appreciate and understand the staffing issues, but I don't believe it was limited to 20 acres. I believe that the direction was to all the remaining parcels within the Polo Estates area. We want to make sure that we take into consideration what remains and to consider where we can create transitional zones.
Councilmember, I'll have to go back and refer to my notes on that. The 20 acres I mentioned was forefront in my mind, but I will double check and I'll be happy to update through the city manager, the city council, if I made an error in my statement.
Thank you. We appreciate that because I believe at this point in the development of the Polo Estates area, we need to focus more on transitional and increased density and commercial opportunities than 1 acre estates or half acre estates. I think we're done with those higher lots, the acres in 1 acre residential. I think we're done with those. And I think it's time to transition from what we have to the Polo area to make sure that we have that buffer for future development.
And if I just might add in response to what the council member said, if the council ultimately decided to, in essence, upzone those areas that were identified in the current general plan for lower density, that would actually support the city's mission as proposed in this housing element update to achieve more housing production because we would have more land available with higher density. So that is an opportunity to help move along the goal of meeting these arena numbers that we've been talking about tonight by looking at upzoning of areas that were originally identified in the general plan 2040 for lower density. So that is certainly something that I think is a very reasonable consideration. And like I said, I will come back to the council through the city manager with more information on that after I go back and kind of refresh my notes.
Correct. And that is why we initiated the conversation, not at the request of the property owners, but with the goal of increasing density in the surrounding areas where we could for additional housing, additional housing mixes, I should say.
Got it. Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Councilmember Mead. Councilmember Holmes. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I had one question. When we're looking at the numbers compared to the arena, and then we're looking at the numbers after the rezoning, we see that the low income units we're close to about the same, right? We have about 800 surplus. On the moderate income, we have about 300 surplus, and the above moderate income, we have over 6,000 surplus. So can you explain to me the reasoning behind why we're planning on so much more of the above moderate income than the other two?
Sure, I can
Go ahead.
I can go ahead and answer that. So the above moderate income units are actually all identified from projects in the pipeline. So that might be entitlements that are pending that have already been previously approved either by your city council or previous city council members. So it's not so much as that the city is planning on those. Those are just happen to have already been entitled and are pending development that is expected to likely be developed this planning period. And so the lower and the moderate income unit capacity, that is capacity that has been identified after the rezone.
And so is those 6,300 units, all of those are already planned for?
From the total existing capacity, that's correct. So the total 9,852 units that you see for the above moderate income units, those are all pipeline residential development that is already credited towards the RENA.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kevin, if you could, on the actual numbers themselves, what is the opportunity you feel to actually reach them in the 8-year period? I mean, realistically?
Councilmember, that's a really good question. And I'm going to be as honest as I can be with you and the rest of the council. I don't think those numbers are achievable unless we suddenly see an immense increase in the housing production we're seeing in our community. In the last 2 years, despite a pandemic, we have seen 420 new single family units in 2020, and we're about 520 new single family housing units in 2021. Well, those numbers are impressive and certainly go back to days of when there was more housing production. We would have to go back to the days of 2003, 4, 5, and 6 in this community to start really making progress towards the 7,812. So, well, there is certainly a housing need. It is in large part going to be how quickly the market responds. The city is very efficient with our processes. I feel very comfortable that we can move things through quickly in the development review process. But if the market is not building, then we cannot necessarily force the market. We can incentivize them. So I question whether we will see realize that 7,812, but I can assure the council that at the staff level, we will do everything in our power to try to make it happen with your support and your assistance.
Thank you. And then also, I know part of the issue is with our zoning. We did with the general plan, but we haven't come back with our zoning yet. I know a lot of the issues that some of these developers are having, especially for multi-units and maybe affordable housing, is the parking itself. And I know we've been taking it on a case-by-case basis. When do you think that we'll have some kind of idea of when zoning to be able to give people credit for less parking in some of these areas than we do now?
So an excellent question, council member. So as I mentioned earlier in discussing the question from council member Ramos Omid, the reduction in staffing has impacted our timeline on the zoning code update. However, we are working to quickly get us back on speed. City Manager Montgomery has prioritized this for me. So I actually met with the consultant team yesterday, and we put together a schedule and a game plan so that our goal is to be in front of the Planning Commission and yourselves in, I would say, early spring. We're going to quickly start moving items through the Planning Commission in a study session format to get them up to speed. And then we will start doing the public hearing. So I would say by mid-2022 at the latest, assuming the council is supportive of the changes, we would have the zoning in place that would implement the general plan, that would realize the densities that Elizabeth and Erica were talking about in terms of the needed zoning to support the numbers that we seek to achieve.
Appreciate that. And I think a lot of it too is and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, if the state of California would get out of our way and allow us to dedicate land for affordable housing without it kicking in prevailing wage and somehow allow the city to do it, we have plenty of property that we would be willing to give the right developers to be able to build where they could save some money and do it. But it seems that they want to continue to force down higher prices, which makes it unaffordable for a lot of people to develop affordable housing unless they have all the grants. And it's so competitive nowadays with all the different state agencies and that getting involved, that when you actually have to have all the right numbers and extra credits and stuff to actually get to it, I think if the state would help us, I think we could move forward on a lot of affordable housing. I think the council's ready for it. I just don't know if the state's ready for it. And then I think we really need to look at manufactured homes and other homes to get starter homes involved in some of the areas, especially some of the outlying areas where we can be able to put them in and be able to develop them. We have quite a few beautiful home communities here that are scattered throughout the city. And I think it's a great opportunity. Right now, manufactured homes are still affordable. And it gives a person an opportunity to own a starter home and then move on to other homes as either their family develops or as they start to retire into smaller homes and communities. I used to live in a 3,000 square foot home, and now I live in a 1,500 square foot home because that's what I desire and need for my family. So I think giving them a variety of opportunities will help us too. So I think as we look forward, we need to look at other opportunities. So I do appreciate all the hard work and dedication. I know we need to approve this for a part of our element for the state, but I look forward to many more homes here for our community to give people the opportunity to have their home and their dream of the American dream of owning their own house. So thank you very much, and thank you for the comments, and thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder, and thank you, our consultants from DUDEC, for bringing this to us. And I concur with all the comments and concerns with the situation we have now. And I will borrow Mr. Snyder's words. This is not a solution to our issue. It's a roadmap, right? And those numbers may not be attainable, but we will strive for them. And whether it's, being innovative with our housing, different types of housing, and also incorporate our seniors. We have a large senior population who are on fixed incomes, who we have to also factor into this equation with the affordable. So thank you for bringing this to us. And this is something that we have to get through, to align with, our general plan. So if anyone would like to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 10254, approving a general plan amendment to adopt the housing element 2021 through 2029 and adopt a negative declaration for the housing element.
I'll second the motion.
We have a first by Councilmember Miller, a second by Councilmember Hamid. Could I get a vote, please?
Councilmember Holmes,
Aye.
Councilmember Miller.
Aye.
Councilmember Ramos Hamid,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Ortiz,
Aye.
and Mayor Furman.
Aye. Resolution number 1025 passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Snyder, and thank you, your staff, and thank you to our consultants at DUDEC.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, we'll move on to the next item. It's item number 10. It's public comments for items not on the agenda. And we have 3 comments. Our first comment is Celeste Feeler. Feeler, you have 3 minutes.
That's the timer. Well, I'm back. Last time I was at this meeting, I was talking about the crime and the transparency. And I was stopped before leaving the meeting to talk about that, how safe Indio is, and, basically what am I talking about? Well, after that meeting, I was sent a link to you guys talking about how you want to hide the crime in Indio. So when I came up here, I was absolutely right that there is a lot of crime here, and you guys want to hide it from the community. So when I left, I was actually given, some really nice emails from the people in the department, the admins. I was contacted by a few people that could help me out when it came to, finding out the numbers on things. But I was also threatened by one of your sitting board members because I spoke up about my own community. I don't need to mention any names, but, this is real. I shouldn't have to be threatened as a community, as a citizen, because I'm voicing my opinion about the crime that I'm seeing. So I will be bringing that up at the next meeting because I only have 1 minute and 35 seconds. So my one demand to the sitting board member is do not call me, do not harass me, do not go over to the next city and say for me to shut the fuck up, because it isn't going to happen. And those are exact words. That will not happen. I will bring every news media here if it does happen. Okay, this is going to stay right here. That is unprofessional, that you guys would even find it acceptable to hide the crime and then tell me to be quiet. That isn't going to happen. I have to be louder. Going off of that, our children are now suffering in schools because of masks. And we sit up here, we watch you guys all wear these masks, but out in the public, it's all for show. You guys take them off. So I just wanted to point out that January 18th, we have our next school board meeting, and I'm actually inviting you, Mayor, to attend our board meeting to defend children when it becomes, or, regarding masks, because child that is special needs that has been kicked out of school because he is mask exempt. So I created a sign for you and for Ortiz if he'd like to go, but it says, if I can go to a party maskless with Supervisor Perez, our children can go to school maskless too. So I hope that you will be defending our children after we saw all of those pictures all over the internet. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next comment, Miss Wendy Bayer.
Hi, good evening. A little bit on the same topic. Over the last month, I've had an opportunity to speak to many members of the community, some more active than others, some people who are heading up homeowners associations, neighborhood watch groups, some police officers. And we were treated some months ago where I live in Sun City here in Shadow Hills to a lengthy presentation by Councilman Miller, who was very knowledgeable about the development that's going on in Indio and all that. Was a very pleasant evening. And during that time, I believe, Glenn, is it correct? You mentioned $28 million coming from the feds. Was that correct? Quite a few, 10, 20 million. Okay. And so my question to you is regarding our police force. I've had an opportunity to find out that the police force is depleted, especially when it comes to beat cops, that they're working excessive mandatory overtime. And I think with all the things that we see in the news, with the police officers having to make split-second decisions, not only for their own lives, but for the lives of the community, that being stressed in that manner for a prolonged time is not a good idea. So what I found out is that Palm Springs, for instance, is offering a $30,000 per head bonus if you wanted to apply to become a police officer, and we are doing nothing. And so what I'm asking specifically is why, I would like an explanation, a comment on why we are not offering any incentive to join our police force here when there's that much money coming from the feds, and we're already seriously depleted, especially relative to 1980 measures. There's fewer cops in the streets, and I have to believe that Indio is a great deal bigger than it was in the 1980s. So I don't know what would cause a police chief and the administration not to want to beef up the police force and give their cops some relief and give the community something to look forward to in terms of policing, rather than having armed vigilante groups, which I promise you, this is the discussion where I live and where other people live. Retired cops, retired military are armed and they are communicating with each other because they have no intention of having their properties overrun. How that would be a fun situation for the city of Indio. So I'd like to get some feedback and some comment on that because it makes no sense to me whatsoever. And with that, I'll close my remarks and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Bayer. We'll move on to Mr. Trinidad Redondo.
Good evening, Mayor Furman and Mayor Pro Tem Ortiz and the rest of the council. I just wanted to come here tonight to introduce myself. I'm the new governmental affairs specialist for Imperial Irrigation District. And I handed my cards to the staff here so that they could give you guys my information. And if you should have any issues with your power or energy, please give me a call. I'm available 24 hours a day, just to, if anything comes up. And I appreciate you reaching out to me, Mayor Furman, so that telling me about that power outage.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
So, thank you.
Right. Thank you. Welcome.
Congratulations.
And we have one more public comment, Mr. Mesa.
Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm having last council sitting, we were talking about the taxes and the money that we're charging in sales tax and how we're going to spend the money and how good it was going to be. I wonder how many supervisors we got to go around and checking the street lights, to checking the alleys. Right in the alley, right in King Street, right in back of my place, I've been picking trash. Right now, you got sofas, mattress, and everything else. They've been there for a month, a little bit more than a month. Last time I talked to, I think was you, Mr. Miller, they told me they have a company who pick up all the trash around the places. It was you, okay. And and I don't see it happen. The same thing Elaine told me about the police going around the places, private police going around the places and checking the places. I park in my place cleaning and doing there for 2-3 hours. I still don't see anybody going around. And we're talking about it, you guys talking about issuing another bond. We issue a bond for the water department. We issue a bond for the streets that I haven't seen the whole thing finished yet or done completely. We issue bonds for quite a few things, right, Lupe? Since you've been in the city council, since you've been mayor, we issue bonds for all kinds of things, and we keep paying for all this. We issue a bond for the police department about 10 years ago, I'm right. And like some of the people say, we depleting the police department. Like I told you the last time, I called the police, they told me an hour later, I called them and they told me they were real busy. Okay, so so I'm wondering why that I happen to see pass through Palm Desert or pass through La Quinta and I see El Paseo, I see a light out and 2 days the light is fixed. And I asked one of the city councilmen, I say, how are you doing? He said, we have a supervisor at night to go around and put whatever it has to be done. And that has to be take care of it. Why are we not able to take care of it? We keep paying taxes. We pay you extra money in the sales tax. We pay you taxes. We pay property taxes and everything else. And in fact, people can go through trash in your properties and we have to pick them up. We're the one paying you the taxes. We're the one keeping the city going and everything else, and we have to do the work, pick up the trash and everything else. You find in my place 2-3 tires every goddamn week the people threw out that I pick up. I usually keep a trailer full of tires for a time you guys have an open thing for I can take the tires, and your employees can tell you that. Yes, in the alleys in my place and my properties. And you say we got people going around checking. Why we don't cut anybody? Why we keep having that? Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mesa. We do not have any further comments. Do we have any online? No. And so we will move on to item 11, which is adjournment. Our next council meeting, the joint council meeting and IWA meeting is January 19th, 2022. If no other council members or city manager have any comments, we'll adjourn this meeting. Okay.